In this video, I'll be explaining to you guys some of the types of construction contracts that are used in the Australian construction industry. So what we will be learning today, I'll present the definition of a standard form contract, and then I'll give examples of these standard form contracts that are used in Australia. Now, we all know that a contract is a legally binding agreement between two parties or more than two parties. The contract can be anything from a written form to a verbal promise. When it comes to standard form contracts, the definition of that is it's a contract type where the terms and conditions are set in advance. So there's little to no negotiation that's involved between the parties. Why would we adopt standard form contracts in the construction industry? Well, there's a number of reasons. They're more efficient, so they save you a lot of time because the conditions and a lot of the provisions are already set out in advance. And hence you avoid a lot of the transaction costs, so you don't have to worry about including certain conditions or excluding some. They're already present there. And what typically happens is that you and the other party, you decide on the provisions or the conditions that you want to keep and the ones that you want to remove. However, what we notice is that for sophisticated projects, um, they aren't as useful. And the reason that I say that is because there's all these conditions that are not applicable for sophisticated projects. So when projects are massive and complex, we might not necessarily adopt a standard form contract. However, if generally speaking, if you just have like a normal project, normal construction project, a standard form contract is the way to go. Now, in terms of the types of standard forms, there's several types actually. So in Australia, different organizations, they use different forms, but the most notable form is the Australian Standards Form. And on the screen in front of you, you can see a list of them. So AS2124, for example, that's used in construct-only projects. So where you have a project that's construct-only, that's a suitable standard form to use. AS4000 likewise for construct only. The difference between AS2124 and AS4000 is the fact that AS4000 is a successor, and there are slight differences in terms of EOTs, for example. So the conditions that grant an EOT, and how to calculate some of the delay costs, etc. Then there are, contracts that are specifically targeted towards design and construct, so AS4300. It's mostly used on commercial construction projects. We also have AS4902. Again, it has the general conditions for design and construct projects. And then we have the AS4916, again commonly used, especially when you have a principal that's engaged, where you have a principal that engages a construction manager to manage the overall project on the principal's behalf. So that's just a list of some of the Australian standards forms. When to use these forms? It depends on what you're trying to achieve and the contract that you're seeking. So if you've got a lump sum project, a lump sum a contract, construct only contract, then it's AS4000 and AS2124. These would be the standard form contracts that you would use. If it's a lump sum design and construct, then it's AS4902 or AS4300. And if you have a contractor that's involved early on in a construct only project, then it's AS4916. You can also use AS4000, but you might need to modify some of the terms and conditions. Likewise, for AS2124, there might be a need for modification of some of the terms. There are also other contract forms that are used in Australia, so the FEDEX Forms, GC21 and Abic. So what's the FEDEX Forms? Developed by the International Federation of Consulting Engineers. Mostly used on massive projects. So we're talking about high value projects, more than $100 million. It's especially used in the private sector, so mining and non-mining as well, private sector infrastructure. So any project where it's heavily involved in infrastructure, that's where you find them using the FEDEX Forms, and it's also used in process engineering projects. The GC21 is again another important standard form that's adopted specifically in New South Wales by the government. So whenever you've got government projects, especially infrastructure government projects, that's the standard form that you would adopt, and it's usually projects with a value of over $5 million. And finally, the ABIC, developed by the Australian building industry. So it's a combination, I think, of the architects and master builders. So they came up with this standard form, and it's primarily used in residential buildings where the owner is a private individual. Some use in commercial and infrastructure projects, not that common. And an example is the MW form of the contract. So the major works form, it's, as the name implies, it's suitable for major non-housing or non-domestic projects in all states and territories in Australia. As usual, here's a list of references for you guys to check out. So do go through them. It's a very important topic to understand because you will be using it a lot in the construction industry. I mean, in terms of these forms. So make sure you understand that. Thank you very much.